that I just infect just to watch them die. And I'm going to talk to you today about some of the stupidest things that I see happening that cause machines to get infected. Let's do the agenda. A little bit about what I do. So, oh, is this freaking out? I know, it's had a bad day. Let's drop the screen resolution a bit and see if that fixes it. Sorry, everyone. One moment, please. So, you want to try 1280 by 800, maybe? Let's see if that works. Anything? No. 1280 by 720. Negative? Really? I'm going to go to... So, stupid stuff. What is the stupid stuff that we're talking about? Among other things, in the lab that I operate in, both here in Draper and in Colorado, we're running a lot of malware on real machines. We're running it on VMs. The company I work for makes some very interesting malware detonation products as well, and so I use those in the lab. But in general, what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis is I'm running this stuff, observing what it's doing, and then trying to, in the case of when it's something interesting, publicize it. In the case of, in most cases, I'm trying to add the domains and the IP addresses where the malware is talking to, or when it's retrieving malware from somewhere out on the net, to our reputation service, which then protects our customers. And when I see bad stuff or stupid stuff, I try to call attention to it. So, these are the products that we use. Security analytics basically is like a Wireshark on steroids. It is basically a full fidelity packet capture system which extracts a bunch of metadata and then allows you to search using that metadata to find interesting traffic. SSL visibility is a man-in-the-middle SSL decryption box. It's basically a standalone box, just sits there. You put the CA certificate on all the machines that are going to be infected with malware. You let the malware infect them, and then you watch all the SSL traffic. Malware analysis appliance is basically a sandbox that runs the malware in a real Windows environment and then gives you a nice report. All right. And we use a lot of third-party tools. And I've just stepped on a cable and it went out. Is that it? Okay. They're gonna replace the switch. So unfortunately, the one thing I really want to show you. So I flew out here from Colorado on Monday. And just in my experience of flying out in one day, I found sort of 3 stupid things happening in public places. So this is the first one. So I was in the airport in Denver waiting to get on the plane, and I noticed that the monitors in the lobby were throwing these weird error messages, and they were kind of half displaying stuff. And I took a closer look at them, and here's the tight screenshot. And it was displaying a bunch of information about what was running on the machines that were doing the displays, and it had their entire toolbar at the bottom of the screen with all the things in the system tray, all the applications that are on by default or installed by default in that toolbar on the bottom of the screen. Just really dumb things, like seeing what all the applications are. I don't know what that bullseye thing is that's running in the system tray, but it doesn't look good. Then a few feet down in the same building, there was a different display, and this one had this found new hardware thing running in, you could see that it had somebody had plugged something into it, and it was trying to load the drivers for it, and you could also see in the system tray that it had VNC installed, not something you want to advertise to everyone in your airport, right? Then I went to IKEA here in Utah, and I was going to the checkout, and this is what was displayed on the card swiping machine. When I went to go swipe my card, I actually went to a different checkout line, but it had all the information, all the IP address information, what operating system was running on the point of sale thing, and I liked the fact that it was running the Fancy Pants plugin. Right? So when we talk about malware stuff, a lot of the stuff that makes it into the news are these, APT groups or something, star.panda or whatever it is. But for every one of those kinds of things that makes the news, there are thousands of malware idiots out there who are just trying to get by on a day-to-day basis, committing crimes, stealing from people to make a buck, right? And they're doing all of this stuff when they're running their malware. And it's very hard. It's not an easy thing to do. You can see from this list that they have to kind of manage this entire process. I wouldn't be able to do it. It's not an easy job. But somehow these guys, kludge their way through it. But they usually do it really badly in one or another aspect. They're not perfect at everything, right? So here's what are some of the things that make these tricks that they're using stupid. They're either obvious, they're just all out there for everyone to see, or they make mistakes. Or sometimes they just have bad malware, and it's buggy and it crashes, or it just reveals itself, or it does something that's so obvious, you think, how could someone possibly get infected with this? And yet, they do, right? And the people who are confronted with these attacks, it's the same thing. You would think that your users and your administrators in your organizations are smart enough not to get fooled by this. But the reality is that we do get fooled by these things on a daily basis. Sometimes you have control over it, and sometimes you don't. But either way, the smartest people in the room will still get tricked by these things once in a while. Even, one of my colleagues told me the other day that he got an email that looked like it came from LinkedIn, and he came this close to clicking it, and then he realized something, popped up in his mind. He had a red flag on it, and he hovered the mouse over the link, and it wasn't going to LinkedIn. It was a phishing page. So anybody can get fooled. So what are some of these stupid tricks? All right. So one of my focuses of research that I work on a lot is malicious spam. And I see a lot of it. I have a system in the lab that's basically collecting this stuff. If you want to send me your spam, I would actually love to get it. Come talk to me after the talk. But we see a ton of this stuff, and this mal spam, the malicious spam, is the worst of them all, because at the end of this, there's usually a malware payload on the Windows machine that received these messages for one reason or another. One of the characteristics that we see in the worst kinds of these spams is that they do appeal to emotion. They're trying to tell you, you've just gotten a speeding ticket. Here's the picture from the camera that proves that your car was the one that was speeding. They tell you, hey, you've won a free pizza. Why don't you click this link and we'll send you a coupon for your free pizza. They'll tell you things like, there's a murderer on the loose. The attached file contains the information from the New York City Police Department, and if you see this person, make sure you call the police. Any of these things, these are all real campaigns, by the way, and it's just a tiny slice of them. It's no longer just you have a package, UPS is trying to, deliver it to you, and they can't get it to you, here's your shipping information. It's gone way beyond that. All these tropes are part of the mal spam family, and they continually grow. So we could say, watch out for stuff that looks like a shipping email, or look for stuff that says it's from the police, that says you have a speeding ticket. But the reality is, it's just designed to make you click before you think, to get that emotional thing firing up in your chest, like, oh no, something bad is I gotta check this. Before you think about it, you've already infected yourself, right? And one of the ways that they're doing that, it used to be pretty much universal that these mal spams would include a zip file with a malicious executable inside. And that's still the case a lot of the time, but not all the time. And just in the last month, we've seen a huge increase in the amount of spam that's using weaponized document files. Word docs, Excel spreadsheets, and even PowerPoint can contain macros and other scripting that will basically allow the guys to either drop a file that's embedded in, drop a file that's embedded in your system, embedded in the Word document or the Excel document onto your system, or it will go out and download that stuff and bring it down to your machine. And it's extremely effective because most people don't think of Office documents as hostile. And we're going to show you a demo of this in a little bit. One of the other stupid tricks that we see a lot is this use of convoluted or confusing or just really elaborate tricks where they want to infect your system and they're trying to hide their tracks. And they go through a huge number of steps to try to hide their tracks. And if any of those things fail, then the whole thing fails. And this was going on for about 6 months at the beginning of this year, and it's kind of trailed off. But I don't believe that this is gone for good. The link that's at the bottom of this screen here links to an infographic that we created to kind of document the process involved in one of these extremely complicated attacks. I mean, a huge domino effect of stuff that eventually leads to infection, but only if all the pieces work. So what do you do? How do you find out what's bad, and how do you basically work to counter this? Well, a lot of the time it's actually really easy to see. It's not easy to see on this screen, unfortunately. I'm sorry for the people in the back. So, for example, here's that Pizza Hut coupon ad that I was talking to you about. It's not really an ad. It's, you click the thing that says get free pizza coupon, and it would deliver you in a zip that contained an executable. So you just look at this email, and I'll just describe it to you. It says it's from Pizza Hut, support at ecamseguridad.com.ar. Okay, so Pizza Hut probably wouldn't be sending you a message from a server based in Argentina. The link at the bottom there that kind of shows the, where this was going to go to is shoesforcruise.cn. So an Argentinian server sending you an email that says it's from Pizza Hut that links to a server in China and delivers a zip file that contains an executable. How do you not miss this stuff? And yet, it's incredibly effective. This particular campaign is called Dridex, and it was being used pretty regularly for about a year until they realized that people were able to discern the patterns in the URLs that they were using, and they were able to figure out that if you look at the file as it's coming down, that if it's a zip, it's probably bad. So they stopped doing it. Now they're using these Word documents instead. Posing as free stuff, always a popular, method of getting people to infect themselves, right? If your kid wants to get get Minecraft, but they don't want to pay for it, it's $8 on the App Store. They'll go to some site that lets them download it for free. It's a Trojan version of the app, and it's unbelievably bad how effective this is as a technique, because people will do anything for a free thing, even if it costs $1. They'll go and download a Trojan and infect themselves just to save themselves $1, without having any idea what it's going to do. And it's an incredibly effective technique. It's kind of depressingly effective. And then we've been seeing a lot of these lately. So the screenshot shows a mobile version of what we used to call a rogue antivirus, or just some kind of a warning message that seems to indicate that there's a problem with the machine that you're using. And we see these on Windows where you get these pop-ups that take the full screen of the machine, and they look like a blue screen of death, and they tell you to call an 800 number because Windows support needs to talk to you about something, and then the people on the phone will scam you out of $100. I like this mobile one because, in particular, so I was visiting a site. It was on a tablet. The tablet's been modified with something called Cyanogen mod. So it was running Android, but it's a custom version of Android. And the user agent string in the browser didn't pass the version of the tablet that was being used up to the web server. So when this thing when it displays this pop-up message, which is the one that's in the upper left, it says generic Android tablet security alert. It's nothing more scary than the generic alert, right? And this is the most effective way of getting rid of these things. Close the browser. It's not going to do anything bad, especially if it's these fake Windows support things. Just close the browser. Kill it. All right, let's talk about some of the things that they do on your machine. So This is one of my favorites. It's an all-time, popular thing with malware guys, to take a file that's an executable and stick a .pdf in the middle of the file name and then have the .exe. And why did they do that? Because for most people, when you get Windows out of the box, it turns off the feature within Windows that shows you the real file suffix. So if you disguise something with an icon that looks like a Word doc or a PDF, and you send it to somebody, most people are not going to recognize that that's an executable. It's actually really easy to see what it is if you just right-click it and do properties before you open it. But how many people do you know that do that? It's undeservedly effective. One of the other bad things that they're doing a lot of is this hooking process, where it used to be that when you would run a piece of malware, you could open up Task Manager and you might see the malware as a process running in Process Explorer or in in Task Manager. That's not really the case anymore. Almost all malware is going to hook a system process and run within the memory space of that system process so that it just looks like, service host.exe. It's a real service host. There's nothing about it that is indicative that it's doing anything bad. But like in this case, this is a machine that was running Windows XP. We infected it with a Trojan called Dire. And Dire does SSL for its command and control communications. In this case, if you just look at you look at the properties of this thing in Process Explorer and go to the TCP/IP tab, you can see that this decom launch service was doing all this SSL traffic, and it was trying to connect to an SMTP server as well. The SSL traffic was on this weird port 4443, which is an indicator of compromise for Dire, and we see that a lot. But it just takes looking to see that, like, hey, this is the process that's doing something bad. This may be an infected machine. It's actually kind of hard to discern this. I don't know how many people run Process Explorer all the time. I have it set to start up when I boot my machine. Not a lot of people are using it, but incredibly useful tool, by the way. Right? Another undeservedly successful social engineering trick is to try to trick someone into disabling a security feature that would otherwise protect them. We see this with the malicious Word documents and the malicious Excel documents. These maldocs all prompt the user to enable macro scripting. By default, Microsoft Office turns these things off. And it's off for a reason. And they will warn you with big messages on the toolbar that says, macro scripting is disabled for this document. You downloaded it from the internet. This is really bad. Don't do it. And then the document says, oh, you need to do this to be able to see the document. Don't do it. Then once they've got that machine infected, yeah, they'll steal your passwords. But they want to use that machine to eke as much value out of it as possible. And so a lot of the times we see them basically repurposing them for other things. You might see some percentage of a botnet get used to send more spam to reinfect other users and increase the size of the botnet. And it's really fun when we see this in the lab, because we're getting all this email, we're recording it all with security analytics, and we can see where it's going to, who it's coming from. Sometimes we see who's controlling it. We get all their usernames and passwords for these mailboxes that they're using to send it. And we get the samples if they attach them to the messages, or the URLs if they embed them in the messages. So in the case of this little slice that's in the upper left corner here, we had a machine that was infected with Dridex, and Dridex pulled down a second payload that was doing spam relaying, and that thing was just doing SMTP to hundreds and hundreds of people until we had to pull the plug on that machine because it was becoming a spam nuisance. The one on the bottom, the machine was infected with a malicious document. The malicious document dropped Pony, which is a downloader, and Pony downloaded CryptoWall, which is one of these really nasty crypto ransomwares that then holds all your information hostage for $500 or $1,000. Well, that machine, normally when we see the crypto ransomware stuff get on the machine, It's usually the end stage of the infection. It's when the bad guys have decided that there's nothing really left of value that they can get off this machine, so they're just going to hold you hostage until you pay them some money or wipe the box. Well, this was a weird case because this particular machine, we open the Word doc, it drops a Trojan, Trojan downloads the ransomware. Ransomware then downloads another Trojan. Kind of weird. Never seen that before. The other Trojan was a proxy server. The proxy server is getting communication back and forth all day long from Russia. So they're sending commands through my machine to then connect to webmail services. They were using Gmail, Yahoo, and this 163.com to send spam, and they were attaching the malware, the malicious doc, to the spam messages in the webmail. So you can see here that, you know, the MIME types were represented here of, you know, they're sending the message, and then here's the Word document that was being attached to it as well. So it's kind of nice because we're basically getting the malware before the victim. We can send it off to VirusTotal immediately, and then before the victim, hopefully before the victim opens the message and then, you know, gets the Word document and infects themselves, their AV will catch it. All right, so some of the network stuff. So, oh, by the way, we're about halfway through the presentation, and I wanted to let you guys know that if there's any questions for me that are, you know, legit questions and not just goofing off, I have a couple prizes up here. So please don't be shy, and feel free to shout out your questions. I think I can see most of you, so wave your arms around. Yes? Question is, can your machine get infected if you don't have admin rights? Sometimes, but usually not. So most of the malware in the cases that I'm showing you are basically you're required to have admin rights to be able to execute a payload or run a program that was not previously approved. Sometimes they can, though. So it kind of depends on the malware. Some of it will run in reduced permissions mode, and then they might hook a system process and quit, and then use that system process with higher level permissions to do other things. But in some cases, a reduced permission level can protect you. Okay. Come see me afterwards. Good one. All right. So this is just a slice of the distribution of bad networks, known bad networks that my network was talking to over, 299 and a half days. From the beginning of the year until yesterday, basically, I took this screenshot of the geolocation tab in Security Analytics. And you can see that there's pretty much a distribution across everywhere where you would expect that there would be a lot of internet access, where people are running data centers or where some of this stuff is hosted, because a lot of the bad stuff is happening, you know, not on some guy's computer in Nigeria, but is happening up in the cloud somewhere, and the guy in Nigeria is controlling it. So one of the tricks that these guys are using is to try to figure out, once they've gotten on your machine, if they want to be able to do specific things with that infected machine, they want to know where in the world is it. Well, the problem is that most machines are now running behind NATs. Almost no one is going to have an infected machine connected directly to the internet without some kind of barrier between it, and a NAT address is not useful. So a lot of these malware have gotten into the habit now of using a couple of different methods of figuring out what their public-facing IP address is and sending that back to home. It's pretty easy. So this is the rule, one of the rules that we have in the malware analysis appliance that we use to determine when something has a propensity to be doing bad things. We call these patterns. And this is the pattern for figuring out what your public-facing IP address is, right? It's just looking for DNS resolution requests for any of these websites. And it's amazing to me that the malware guys use the same services over and over and over again, because it's very easy to kind of create one of these things. But what they do is they just use these free services, ostensibly on the, you know, with the idea behind it being no one's going to be looking for this because it's a public service. Like, yeah, sure, people use it all the time. But when you're running a malware in a sandbox, this is a bad indication of something to come. This is one that's worth mentioning. So I mentioned this Trojan called Dire. In addition to using SSL for its command and control traffic, it has pioneered a lot of very interesting techniques for exfiltrating data and finding out information about the machine that it's running on. One of the techniques that it pioneered is it was the first malware that we saw that uses this protocol called stun. Now, stun is used in a lot of voice over IP services. Sometimes network attached storage uses it. And it's a way of tunneling through a NAT to find what your public IP is, so that, you know, if you're Vonage and you've got a Vonage box inside of a NAT and someone wants to make a call to you, that box has to be able to receive the call and do its thing. So stun is really part and parcel of a lot of these VoIP services. Dire was using stun to do exactly the same thing, and they were using the voice over IP service stun servers to do it. And the cool thing about stun is it doesn't just tell you what the IP address is, but it actually profiles the NAT in a way that that gives you a lot more information about the internal network. And it sends all that stuff back in its command and control traffic, which is down here at the bottom. That's some of the C2 traffic that we decrypted from SSL. You can see that it was, you know, reporting back that it was on a symmetric NAT, and this is the public-facing IP. Bad stuff. What's another bad thing? Fake user agents. Boy, these just drive me crazy because they're so obvious. Look at that one on the bottom, boleto.exe. Boleto means wallet in Spanish, right? So, or ticket. There's a lot of these, and it's like the malware guys don't think anyone's looking, because they're not usually. But I am, and I see it. So, you know, for example, you can see in the upper box, there's a lot of ones that say, you know, Windows NT 6.1, 6.2, 6.3. These tokens represent, they're basically internal code names for Windows 7, Windows 8, Windows 8.1, Windows 10. But there's one in there. Windows 5.1 is Windows XP. And then there's the one at the bottom. What's Windows NT 9.0? It doesn't exist. It's not a real internal version number for Windows. It never existed. Another one that was in there that was kind of interesting is there's one that's for Windows 7. So it says Windows NT 6.1, Internet Explorer 7. Well, if you know anything about Windows 7, you know that when it shipped, it had Internet Explorer 8 installed in it by default. It never had never had IE 7 installed on it. So it's one of these cases where it looks like an otherwise normal, totally benign user agent, but when you think about it, you realize, wait a second, that doesn't make any sense. And if you're running an organization where you've got a lot of machines and you're collecting this kind of data, and you use maybe a couple of standard images for your machines, it's very easy to kind of pick out, hey, on a standard box that's using our company's or our organization's image, if we go to like a website with Internet Explorer, this is what the user agent's going to look like. If we see anything that's different from this, the person has either messed with their machine or something is very wrong. And especially when you see stuff like Mozilla 5.001 Windows U NT 4.0. Totally made up. So is the MSIE 7 on Windows NT 6. All right. Here's another really dumb one, okay? Garbage words. Word salad is what my old boss used to call it, or alphabet salad. It's where you just mix up. You take a bunch of dictionary words and just jumble them together and pull a few out of a hat, and that's the name of your product, right? Your Explosion Help by Optimal Software SRO. That's a piece of malware that I downloaded yesterday. It's a real thing. And you can also see, some of the domain names that they're using also have these garbage words. And some of the SSL certs. The list of these SSL certs that are here are all certs that were being used by Dire in one day. They're now rotating, Dire is now rotating through a cert every 5 minutes when it's doing its command and control. And it constantly is regenerating new ones and using those certs with garbage text. Or actually, they've lately been using what look like the names of people. So it will be like Sally Jones as your, C name. There's no C name Sally Jones. It's garbage. But if you're not looking for it, you're never going to see it. This is a favorite. We're going to tell the server is going to tell the end user or the endpoint that is retrieving a file, that it's one type of file, and then just deliver another. And the operating system doesn't care, because it gets a zip and it can, it saves the zip to the hard drive, and all of a sudden you can unzip it and do stuff with it. But if you have an IDS and your policy is don't allow zips to come down, but you trust that the server is always telling the truth, you got a problem. Like this, in this case, it was telling the machine that it was sending a Silverlight, plugin, basically a browser app like Flash, but it was an executable. And that's a good pivot to this, because this campaign and this campaign are very similar. At first, they were doing this fake MIME-TYPE, and then they realized, people started to catch on. Hey, libmagic is free. We can actually see that you're lying. If you're lying, that's bad machine. We're not talking to you anymore. So what do? We hide the MIME-TYPE entirely by embedding the file within the HTML encoded in base64. And then we use a little trick in HTML scripting to tell the browser, render this as a zip. It's amazingly simple, and it works, and it bypasses everybody. This is one of my favorites, because I just download these ones for fun, just so that I can extract the information about the email accounts and then shut them down. These are really like the bottom of the barrel malware guys that email out these password stealers that then the password steal runs on the machine and does SMTP to send the passwords out and the stolen stuff out. As we're doing all of this, we're seeing the full body of the message, all the credentials, everything they're doing. And if you're just not looking for something with keylogger in the subject line of the outbound messages leaving your organization, there is a problem. Look for it. Here's a couple more of them. So this one was one where I was deliberately infecting the machine, and I was just letting the guys know that I was onto them because it was sending screenshots back attached to the messages. I know you guys probably can't see it, but it's a naughty word. This was a really interesting one. Some guy in Brazil who, and I don't know if you know this, but Brazil is a hotbed of people stealing bank credentials. It's probably the crucible of bank phishing malware in the world, because there's so much of it that comes out of there. One guy got a great idea. I'm gonna use a Microsoft SQL server as my command and control, and I'm going to not only exfiltrate my data using SQL commands, but I'm also going to use that SQL server to return back payload updates and other executables as a way of basically masking it. So if you're not looking at port 1433 traffic, why is somebody who's in accounting doing database development? Like, they should not be talking to open public database servers that are out on the internet, unless they're doing DB admin, in which case give them a pass through the firewall. But come on, this is dead obvious stuff. And I don't know, it's kind of hard to see, but down here at the bottom, you can see that they actually were using SQL commands to do database selects, and then the server was returning back something with a few bytes at the beginning that make it look like it wasn't a PE file, and then you can see the MZ header in there, and this program cannot be run in DOS. So they're stupid tricks, but there's really serious consequences if you aren't looking for them and don't catch them, because as we all know, these machines, once they get infected, they're running for weeks, months, even years, beginning out passwords, being used for sending spam, being used to, as a foothold within your network to navigate within the network and do other bad things. Even though they're dumb tricks, they're really bad. You have to watch for them. So here's my list of best practices, right? The be reflexively distrustful is like a personal watchword for me. Basically, if you see something, just assume they're lying until they've proven otherwise. Turn off the hide extensions for known file types. If you are in control of a network, do it through group policy. Just make it happen. Get the word out that there are these fake files that look like PDFs, but they're actually programs, and they will infect you if you try to open them. Do training for your staff, even the admins. Anybody who has email should be told what to look for, what these bad things look like. Show real concrete examples like I showed you here of what these messages look like. What's a document look like that has a macro script in it? How does it prompt you? And don't finger point, because we can all be in trouble. This bad stuff can happen to anybody. So that's the presentation. And do I have a minute? Am I right at the end? I have like 5 minutes. Are there any questions? There's questions. Okay, go ahead.
A lot of these are very simple to solve for a human being looking at it, right? But it would require a lot of data sharing for any type of system. The one that you gave an SQL server or SQL command coming from someone in accounting, right?
Yeah.
You would need to have a lot of data sharing in your infrastructure to be able to correlate those two things, right?
So the question is, it takes a lot of data sharing within the infrastructure to detect these things. It's easy for a human, but it's hard for machines to do it. Yes and no. So for example, with that database thing, just block outbound traffic on that SQL port. There's really no reason for it to be going out anyway. And if there is a particular machine that needs to use stun, like say if you've got a voice over IP system and it needs to do stun traffic, make sure that that's the only machine that can do outbound on that stun port, and set an alert if anything else is doing it. I mean, it doesn't have to be really, you don't have to make it harder than that. In a lot of cases, it's just finding the weird kind of traffic that shouldn't be there, looking for those anomalies. What was the other person?
Most of the examples you've shown are on Windows or Android. We've seen on Linux.
Okay, so question is, showed a lot of examples of Windows malware. That's where the most of it is. What have I seen on Linux? I haven't seen, to be honest, I haven't looked at a whole lot of Mac stuff. I'm not out there looking for it, so I just don't see very much of it. So that's the sad truth, is that there is some malware out there for Mac. And at DEF CON this past year, there was a great talk by a guy who basically tore apart the entire concept of Mac antivirus. That the Mac anti-malware community is just a shambles. It's very, very easy for Trojans to sneak past any AV on a Mac because it's so rudimentary that they're just not, in some cases it's just changing one byte within a file, or changing a hash, or just changing a couple of things in the file name that gets by a Mac AV. And that's an unfortunate truth. On the Linux side, we do see some interesting stuff. So there are still people out there who are trying to shell shock servers. I have honeypots running on the DMZ segment of my network, and I'm using security analytics to record that traffic. And we see a lot of the shell shock requests come in through the user agents. So they'll do just a get request to the home directory, and then you'll see the shell shock string inside of that. And usually what we're seeing is coming down from that are Perl-based IRC bots. And so then you just got to make sure that you don't have any IRC traffic, regardless of the port that it's talking on, by the way, because these things are using weird ports. No IRC traffic from your Linux servers. Yes?
Obviously, a lot of effort put into writing these things. How are they monetizing their work?
How do the malware guys monetize their work? Right. So the theft of credentials is monetized by collecting all of those credentials and reselling them through the black market to people who want to use them to then either hijack servers or hijack other machines for other nefarious purposes. The guys who are stealing banking passwords specifically just want to log into the bank and do financial transfers as quickly as possible. The fix for that is to use two-factor auth. So if you have some kind of a thing with your phone or a token, 2FA is the best way to protect against that. The ransomware guys obviously are asking you to pay to get your computer and your data back. And I don't know if you guys saw the report from the FBI. They're basically recommending as their default recommendation for anybody who gets infected with ransomware, pay the ransom. And that, what was that?
That was a lie.
That was a lie?
Yeah, that was bad reporting. We mashed several different quotes together.
Okay, that was apparently bad reporting. So here's my take on the whole ransomware thing. If you keep a good backup, and by a good backup I mean something that's not mapped to a drive letter, something that you back up everything on your hard drive and then physically disconnect it from your machine daily or every other day, there is nothing that those ransomware guys can do that you can't just restore back within a day. So if you are okay with losing 1 day's worth of work and you can deal with buying an $89 2 terabyte hard drive and just keeping your stuff backed up on it all the time and then unplugging it when you're done, you don't really have any problem from ransomware. To me, the ransomware problem is a problem that is endemic to people don't want to back stuff up. It is kind of a nuisance. But when you lose everything that you've got on your hard drive, and we've heard cases where there's enterprises where they have shared drives that are mapped to drive letters on everybody's machines, and those shared drives get infected, and then everybody's data gets encrypted, that's when the business, financial process of, well, $500 is probably going to save my bacon and restore everything in a day. So, it's unfortunate, but sometimes that's the only way to get it back. Yes? Sorry, go ahead. Is Windows 10 any better than its progenitors? Ask me next year when I've had some time to poke around with it some more. I've just barely gotten my feet wet with Windows 10. So we're introducing in the sandbox tool that we have, the VMs that we have are called IntelliVMs, and we're putting a Windows 10 one together right now. So we're just testing that. But yeah, ask me next year. Yeah. So the question is, how easily is it removed and cleaned, or is it a wipe and reload? Well, it kind of depends on your risk adversity. If you're very risk averse and you don't want to, if you want to be 100% guaranteed that there's nothing left on that machine, definitely wipe it and re-image the drive. If it's a case where you've got a piece of malware that's on there, and you can see it's just sitting in the Windows directory. And one of the things that our MAA does, and here, let me just show you a report. So this is that sample that I showed you earlier, which was the one with the nonsense file name. This is what the report looks like from the MAA. So here are let me make it a little bigger so it's easier to read. Like you can see that the patterns. Oh, turning off PowerPoint. Okay. There it is. Just move the browser window into the other screen. Okay, so let's make that a little smaller now so it kind of fits. Okay, so this is the MAA, right? And you can see the patterns that are here that kind of describe the behaviors that we consider to be bad in kind of like a ranked order of maliciousness. And then there's kind of a final score up here. In this case, 10 means pants on fire bad. So this is one of those cases where we don't actually know whether or not this is bad. We know what other people think of it, and then we kind of behaviorally will determine whether these things are bad based on all of these factors, and the combination of them together will tell us whether these things are bad. Did I answer that question? Ask the question again. How hard is it to clean? So like in this case, we're getting this report, and it shows you in the file system events and the registry events what it does. So it's created a run key here. So one of the things you have to do is clean out the run key. And then the other thing it's doing is showing you all the places where it copied itself. It wrote itself to the temp directory. It wrote itself to program data in a random file name, path or whatever. Cleaning this up is just delete the files, remove the registry keys, reboot the machine. That's how easy it is to clean this one. Now, in a lot of cases, where they're doing things where they're rootkitting the box or they're doing other stuff, you will do all this cleanup, reboot the machine, and then you'll still see the beaconing even though everything that you think was gone has been removed. And in those cases, you have to wipe and re-image the box because there's no other way to get rid of that malware. It's rootkitting itself, hiding it from you in the file system. But the reality is the bulk of it, the majority of this stuff, is just sitting in plain view where you can find it, and it's just a matter of looking for it. You can clean it up pretty quickly. These reports, They're not public, but I could easily, if anybody wants to come up afterwards, I could share it with you. But no, this is what the MAA does. It will take a arbitrary executable, or actually any type of file. I take a lot of these Word documents and throw them in there. And these arbitrary files, it then runs them in a VM and generates this nice little report. Let me show you what one of these mal docs looks like. So here's my, this is a, I think it's, this is Windows 7 64-bit, okay? And this is a malicious doc, if I can get it to copy itself into the VM. All right, so here's that malicious doc. Now this is one that came in this email message, and this email was addressed to me personally. So this was a targeted attack against me. So I have a justifiable reason to want to get rid of it. So all I do is just double click it, and Word opens. Now let me quickly close out of this and go over to Process Explorer, which is running. And can you see right down here at the bottom? There's that payload. There it is. Your explosion, help, help. It's actually, so this is Pony Downloader. And if I let this thing run for a couple of minutes, you'll see the crypto wall payload will be delivered, start running, encrypt the system, and then throw up that message that says, your machine is infected. Go to this Tor address and pay us. Yes?
Somebody asked a question about admin rights.
Yeah.
Most of the newer malware, as you can see on this one, they'll drop into app data within the user directory. So they're designed to run without admin rights.
Right. So the comment was, right, the Pony, Upatri, Cridex, and these ransomware Trojans, they'll run within the user level account credentials, and they can still do their bad stuff. That was your comment, right? So that you don't need admin access. It helps if you're a malware guy and the person has, admin to their machine. It certainly helps. So here's the document. You saw when we first opened it, it was plain, and then after a minute, the macro script ran, and it did this little thing, and it says the file is protected by Microsoft Office. Please enable editing and content to see this document. Now, on this particular machine, I already have all of the features that would protect you from macros turned off. I have enable all macros, not recommended, potentially dangerous. I can assure you it is definitely dangerous to have this setting enabled, right? But there's all these protections for ActiveX controls, for plugins, where you trust documents. All of these things are designed to thwart these attacks. All it takes is one person who's credulous of the message inside the text field here to let this happen to themselves. So that's our infected box. I think it's probably, let's see what it's doing. We still have some time? It's 4:51. The next person's supposed to talk in about 9 minutes. I think I need to get out of here. But yeah, that malware ran. Look, there's a little stray console that they left open. I'm not clear whether or not this thing is actually going to do anything. But you saw that it dropped and executed that sample. Yeah. All right, any other questions? Yes, over here.
Out of curiosity, any of those covered SQL servers, have you ever tried sending a drop tables command back?
No, hacking back is against the CFAA. So I would recommend against it. That's a really bad idea. Issuing a command is the same thing. You are executing code on a box that you don't control. And in fact, in the case of those Brazilian phishers that were stealing that stuff, it was on a big ISP that's based in Brazil, UOL, which is like the AOL of Brazil. All I had to do was contact them, and once they realized what they were looking for and the types of logins that the guy was using, and he always used the same string in both there were strings in the file itself, in the path where he built the malware, that were also the username on the database server. And so it was this guy who used the handle gulp which is blow in Portuguese. And so once they knew to look for blow or some combination in leet speak of that in Portuguese, they were able to basically look for and find all of his accounts and shut them down. And then they started proactively shutting them down as soon as new ones got created. And that guy has basically been shut down for about 2 months now. But you know, give him a few months, and the guys at UOL will get complacent, and then he'll figure out that they're using his same hacker handle to find him, and he'll change his handle by a different character, and he'll be back up there. Because again, stupid tricks work, even against good guys, especially against good guys. All right. So you guys who asked a lot of questions, if you want to come up and get a music CD or a sticker, I got those up here, and I thank you for your time. And please, if you liked the talk, do the little survey and let the guys here know so that they can ask me back next year. So thank you.